Parents canceled my birthday party because of my spoiled younger brother. I'm 20 meters, and has happened when I was 14. I have a brother that's about 6 years younger than me, and he was extra coddled by my parents for having been diagnosed with high-functioning autism when he was 4, but other than that, he seems very normal, just unbelievably spoiled, and he used it to get his way a lot. And by a lot, I mean nearly all the time. Anything I had, he also had to have. So that meant we had doubles of almost everything that wasn't shared items, and anything he had that I didn't, he'd rub in my face any way he could. When I was 11, I begged my parents for a 3 Deciskans for my 12th birthday. I got one, but then was told to lend it to my brother whenever he wanted it, or else I'd have it taken away, which it was a lot when my aunt found out after seeing my parents forcibly take my 3 Deciskans out of my hands to give to my brother. On one of her visits, she let loose on them for such blatant favoritism. They returned my 3 Deciskans. Immediately then blamed me for the situation after my aunt left, but they didn't make me give it to my brother again. Instead, my parents went out a few days later and bought another 3 Deciskans as a surprise gift for my brother on several of mine and other people's birthdays. My brother made a huge fuss because the party wasn't all about him, even going so far as to outright state that he was upset because he wasn't getting any gifts or getting to blow out the candles on the cake. My parents learned the hard way that they couldn't enable my brother the way they'd have liked at those parties, and were actually kicked out of a few for trying, and because of that, other kids at his school stopped inviting him to birthday parties altogether for me. My birthdays were some of the only days I had that I got to have about me, because otherwise my parents forced my life to revolve around my little brother. And the year prior to when this story took place, my parents ended up paying more attention to him the entire time of my 13th birthday, and even asked me if I'd let my brother blow out my candles for me because he was upset and pouting. I refused it because I wanted to blow out my own candles. They called me a spoiled brat at first, till my aunt intervened and chastised them on their favoritism yet again, and stated how much she had noticed how my brother gets nearly everything between the two of us. Just because he's autistic, my parents got no support from anyone else there other than my brother, who was still crying because he wasn't getting to blow out my candles, and because he didn't get way, he tried to outright spit on my cake out of spite. But my awesome aunt thankfully blocked him before he got the chance, then scolded him till he ran to my mom in tears. My parents took a lot of heat from the other adults there, and then promised to never ask me to let my brother blow out my candles again, but they pretty much just went through the motions for rest of the party. My aunt pretty much took over coordinating everything from that point. The following year, a couple of weeks before my birthday, my parents sat me down and told me they were still going to get me some gifts and a small cake, but my birthday party was effectively canceled to avoid my brother having another meltdown. I told them I couldn't believe they were doing this to me, and they just seemed to shrug it off without a care. So at school over the next week, I told my friends, my teachers, and even my school counselor. All of them were appalled by my parents' lack of consideration or empathy. The vice principal even found out and consoled me, and all of this got back to my parents through social media. My parents ended up grounding and gaslighting me for telling so many people. But that didn't stop me from still telling everyone at school that I was grounded for just being upset my birthday was canceled for no good reason. I guess that made it a lot worse, because several of my parents' own friends, along with parents to other kids in my school, called them up or sent them FB messages basically saying, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And suddenly I was ungrounded. I didn't get an apology either. My dad just walked into my room with his arms crossed, told me my grounding was over early, and then walked out. That was it. I thought my party was still canceled because nobody said anything about it. And my brother thought it hilarious and rubbed it in my face that I wasn't going to get to celebrate. But by the end of the 2 weeks, my parents held a surprise party for me at my favorite restaurant, and then started claiming that was their intent all along. I knew it wasn't from what I'd seen. Everyone was incredibly unhappy with them for what they did, and it showed with any interactions family members had with my parents. So they ended up doing the surprise party to try and save what little of their reputations they had left. But I'm pretty sure they had to pay through the nose that day to just accommodate me. I got dinner with all my friends at my favorite restaurant that had a small arcade, and even got the PS4 game system I'd been jonesing for. At the time, I could tell it was all pretty much planned and bought last minute, because my dad had a look about him that my aunt comically described as looking like a moth had flown out of his wallet. My brother, of course, made a huge fuss that I got that surprise party. But with so many of my friends and their parents there, my mom and dad finally put their feet down on my brother to stop his tantrum when he wanted to push my cake off the table. My brother ended up getting a timeout for the first time since he was a toddler, and my mom had to stay with him to make sure he didn't do anything crazy. And he did try several times to run to the cake or stack of presents. Who knows what he would have done, were it not for the fact at least one adult was always on guard. Even my dad stood guard to keep him away. My mom ended up having to remove my brother and herself from the party entirely and took my little bro to a McDonald's nearby so he could have fun in their play area. And I heard later she spent at least an hour trying to get him to come out of the Playpool tube structure. And he only did so because he had to use the bathroom, then tried to run right back in again. My parents never tried to cancel my birthday again while still I lived with them, though they never again tried as hard or spent as much for the remaining 4 years. I was under their roof. My birthday parties consisted of a local pizza parlor, a cake without even my name written on it, and never again anything as expensive as a new GAM system. I don't mean to sound spoiled, but I was a bit disappointed I never got a cake with my name on it again. My aunt called my parents out on that each year, and each year they claimed they forgot to get the cake decorated. I'm pretty sure that the reason my name was never written on another cake was because my brother always refused to eat pieces of cake that had writing of someone else's name on it at any party, and they couldn't put his name on any of my cakes, or it would have looked very bad for them. But the fact that I still got a day that was just about me at all and not my brother was still fantastic in my book, especially because just about everything else revolved around him. During each of my remaining birthday parties while still living at home, my brother made a fuss, and my mom took him somewhere else to calm him down. I was still required to share my PS4 with my brother, but it was still mine, and I took it with me when I moved out at 18. Little bro did not like that, and had a huge fit till my parents went out and bought another PS4 for him when I moved out. They finally had to deal with how they'd raised my brother so spoiled because I wasn't there to help them with him anymore on his recent 14th birthday. He went mental on our parents for not getting him a PS5 he is now currently grounded for. I don't know how long after causing hundreds or maybe even thousands in collateral damage during his rampage, he picked up a chair and just started destroying anything that was in front of him with it. And my parents just looked mentally checked out when I saw them last. My aunt has also told me they confided in her that they wish they could send my brother to military or boarding school in the future because they can't handle the monster they created anymore. But there's no way they can afford that. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find it ironically funny. Update 1: my parents were thrown out of a child's birthday party because they asked the stupidest thing imaginable. For those who read my previous post about how my parents tried to cancel my 14th birthday, they knew very well what my brother was like during birthday parties that weren't his own, and they tried to enable his behavior in any way they could just because he's high-functioning autistic. Well, that ramp and spoiling didn't go well with people outside of the family. All this happened, I think, when my brother was around 6 to 7 years old. A neighbor boy down the street was having his birthday party, and my brother got invited because they were sort of friends, but probably because they knew my parents would bring a gift, and they don't remember what it was, though. Nor do I really care. My parents dragged me along to this party, even though I'd have rather stayed home and played video games. I was bored and sitting down almost the entire time, so I got to witness pretty much the whole situation. It started when my brother was caught picking up gifts off the table and shaking them. The mother of the birthday boy told him to stop, and my parents tried to defend my brother and say he was harmless, but the lady knew what my brother was really like and had my parents move him away from the presents. There were some games that the kids were playing. Don't remember what they were, but I do remember my brother tried to be the center of attention as much as possible. With each game, the birthday boy got first pick SLT, turn on them all, because it was his birthday, but my brother freaked out because he didn't get to be first, and my parents did ask the birthday boy's mother if my brother could get the first pick/turns, and the lady not only refused but told my parents to get my brother under control or we'd all be asked to leave. Then came time for the cake. The mother lit the candles for the birthday boy, and the adults started singing the happy birthday song they only got as far as singing the birthday boy's name in the song before my brother burst into a tantrum at the table. He grabbed the side of the table and started trying to violently shake it. My parents had to hold my brother back for a moment, and then I saw my mother go up and talk to the mother of the birthday boy again about something, and the poor lady looked positively disgusted, and I learned later that she'd asked her to let my brother blow out the candles first, and then they could redo it. The lady told my mother that it would be best if we left, and then they went back to trying to redo the birthday song while my brother couldn't take it and ran to the table and shoved the whole cake right at the birthday boy. I mean, he used his arm to literally clothesline the cake, and he hit right into that poor kid's face. The whole room was silent for a few seconds, and then a bunch of the kids started laughing. Then the birthday boy started crying, and the adults were all mortified except for my parents. My mother just started hugging my brother tightly and acting like a Karen by saying this could have been prevented if they just let my brother blow out the candles first. The mother of the birthday boy was cleaning up chocolate cake off her son and screamed at my parents to get out the other kids. They started crying because it had finally hit them, that now there was no cake. My mother started dragging my brother out, but he broke free of her and then pushed over the table with all the presents on it. I grabbed him and held him in a headlock till my parents grabbed him. I apologized profusely to the mother of the birthday boy and said I wasn't on my parents' side in the matter. Yeah, that's right. Little 12-year-old me had to apologize for my own parents. My dad yelled to me to get moving or I could walk home. I said I'd walk home. It was literally a 4-mile down the street. I stayed and helped clean up the mess my brother made. The lady thanked me and said that I was a good egg, but my brother was just rotten. Someone went out and got another cake while the birthday boy had to take a shower. Because he was covered in cake, all of the mess was cleaned up, and they redid the birthday song after the party was over. The mother of the birthday boy wrote something out on a piece of paper. It was a handwritten invoice to my parents for the destroyed cake, along with a written threat to call police as someone there with a camera caught everything. I handed the invoice to my parents, and they really didn't look happy when they read it. Then they gave me the cash and told me to take it back to the lady, so I did. And that was pretty much it. Neither that kid or his family ever associated with my brother or my parents ever again, but the messed up thing is that at another birthday party months later, the same situation nearly repeated. Entirely, my mother asked the parents to let my brother blow out the candles, first gave BS excuses as to why, and they outright refused, and my mother acted like a total Karen. My brother tried to knock down the cake. I was on guard and intercepted him. Then we were told to leave. It was after that my brother was no longer invited to birthday parties that were not relatives. And then on my next birthday in that same year, when I turned 13, my parents tried to get me to let my brother blow out my candles, and my aunt tore into them for that. It was then. I guessed that my parents decided that if I couldn't share, then next year I shouldn't have a party at all. And any previous readers know how that turned out. Update 2. My parents enabled my little brother's mini bike mayhem when I was 17. I bought a used mini bike and used it to get to and from a part-time job. Those who read my previous posts know what my little brother is like, the boy my parents extra coddled because he was diagnosed as high-functioning autistic, and anything I had, my brother had to have too. And if I refused to give it, my parents generally took it, at least until the behavior was exposed to the public. When my parents tried to cancel my 14th birthday. After that, my parents stopped forcing me to give my stuff to my brother whenever he wanted it, and that led to some huge tantrums from him. My brother would look for things around the house to throw to the floor and break, usually dishes. My parents actually stocked up on plates from secondhand stores because of that. When I got the mini bike, my brother was upset. I would never let him ride it, but he's destructive with all his stuff. Every time he broke his BMX, I'm the one who had to fix it. Change a flat, new pedals, new tire, new handlebars, new brake line, etc. He's got a stunt BMX that he begged for, and my parents spent hundreds on it, but as much as he loves it, he never fixes it himself or properly takes care of it, just calls me over begging me to fix it. My parents got him the parts and have the tools, but he never bothers to do anything more than pump up a tire, and even then he usually tries to get someone to do it for him. He's also very careless in where he leaves the bike. He left it in a neighbor's driveway, and its handlebars got run over by the neighbor's van. He somehow destroyed the pedals, and a new pair had to be put on. He broke the rear brake line while having a tantrum too. The tire was understandable though, since those were out, but it wasn't hard to swap it, and I shouldn't have had to come over on a Saturday to do it when my brother is perfectly capable of doing it himself. So damn right. I'm not letting him take my mini bike on a joyride, especially with gas prices being so high these days. The mini bike gets like 60 Ms per gallon. So what that, it only goes 40 miles per hour. I only have a 5M commute anyway. About a month before my brother's 14th birthday, my parents called me begging me to come over and fix the BMX again. Little bro had worn the rear tire down to its threads. I was annoyed, but I came over anyway because they offered to pay me. I swapped the tire and sat down for a bottle of water because it was like 100 degrees that day. My brother watched me work on the bike till I was done. His helmet was on, so I figured he was just waiting to go riding on his bike. But the moment my back was turned, I heard my mini bike start up outside and then take off. Little bro took off like a rocket down the street on it. Before I could get out of the garage, I freaked out. But my parents tried to play it off, though. When I didn't plate them, they said they'd get my mini bike back right away. But for them, that was more like just waiting till my brother came back with it. I was annoyed and I wanted to call the police, but I'm not sure if they'd call it a domestic issue or not. My brother finally came back, and he'd somehow not crashed, but the moment he saw me, he took off again. He drove the bike till it ran out of gas, and my parents had to go get him. To say I was furious was an understatement, but my parents basically rolled their eyes, handed me $40, and claimed it wouldn't happen again. I said it better not, or I'd call the cops next time. Not sure if it had helped, but they seemed to take my warning. I had to push my mini bike to the nearest gas station to fill up before I could go home. Before I left, I told my parents that if my brother wants a mini bike so bad, then they should get him one, but then they pulled a 180 and said he wasn't ready to have one because it's a big responsibility and that it was too dangerous because it's practically a motorcycle. I mean, really, they just let him steal mine for like 2 hours to go joyriding to God knows where, and they don't want to get him one themselves. Whatever, I'm used to their hypocrisy. By now, the last time I went to my parents' house, my brother was massively grounded and in his room for his birthday rampage I mentioned in my first post, but just to be sure, I pulled the spark plug wire off my bike before I entered the house. My brother was glaring at me from his window when I left. I just gave him a goofy wave and drove off. Update 3, I suggested to my parents that they sell a bunch of my brother's stuff to get some of their money back for his rampage. They did not hesitate, but wait. There's more. Well, a while ago, someone here commented the idea that my parents should sell a bunch of my brother's stuff. So I talked to my parents about how they could probably recoup some of their losses from the birthday rampage by selling a lot of my brother's stuff. I was surprised by how readily they agreed it was a good idea. I mean, it was like a light bulb moment for them. Then over the weekend, they had a big garage sale. They sold my brother's bike, his video game systems, everything. I went to help out with the sale and could hear my brother crying in his room. All of the video game systems he had were sold, and I mean, there was a lot of them. He had a GameCube, a Wii, 3 Decisiskins, a Switch, PS, 2 PS, 3 PS, 4 Xbox 360, Xbox One, and a ton of games for them all, and they sold all of them. I was pretty tempted to buy something from the sale myself, but I knew if my brother were to be made aware that I had something he used to own, who knows what he might do. So I held back. The bike alone went for $30. They also sold his TV, his RC cars, his drone, and pretty much anything else electronic he owned. They are in the process of selling his gaming PC online now as well. There's a cheap laptop too, but it was mainly used for school, and he was denied access to it for anything else. My parents told me that my brother's room had been stripped of everything but the essentials. While I was visiting during the sale, my brother walked out of his room once, saw me, and then ran back into his room crying loudly. I know, fake crying from him when I hear it, and it was as fake as it gets. My parents know this too and have not fallen for his game. I asked them if he was going to be to therapy, and they said they really have no choice but to that, and they fully admitted this was all their fault for enabling him for so long. I could have rubbed it in their faces, but I think the look they saw on my face was enough that they understood. For the past several years, they've been in progressively worse and worse denial about their bad parenting. Friends and family have been telling them for a long time now that they went way too far, spoiling my brother, and that not only would it come back on them one day, but it had also mean that my brother may be incapable of functioning as an adult. And if that's the case, he'd expect someone to provide for his every need forever. And then I would not become his caretaker when they become too old. My brother hadn't shown much improvement over the next few weeks. He was still being a brat fake, crying, getting into more trouble, and even stole another kid's cell phone at school. He was caught playing on it in his closet, and my parents had to return it to the school to find out who it belonged to. Last week, I had an idea and suggested a family intervention. My parents were hesitant when I brought it up, but they reluctantly agreed to it. I'm sure their hesitation was because an intervention would put them on the spot along with my brother. Then on the next possible day, All close family and some friends could gather at my parents' house. We formed a circle of chairs in the living room. Initially, without my brother in the room, my aunt spoke first, and oh boy, did she let them have it. She'd written an entire speech that we all silently listened to. My parents tried to interject from time to time, but were silenced when it came to be my turn to speak. I also read a speech I composed, basically repeating everything I've told on Reddit thus far, and plenty more. My grandparents went next, and it just sort of followed down the line from there. My mother was in tears, and my father just held her. They both apologized to me heavily and said they were terrible parents and that they ruined my childhood. I'll never get that back. My aunt loudly stated that it should not have come to this for them to realize their own hypocrisy. And from now on, they needed to do better, not only for my sake, but especially for the sake of my brother. So he can grow up normal. My brother was brought into the room next, and he was seated away from my parents because my mother would have an urge to coddle him when he was upset. It didn't take long for the family to lay into my brother. He tried fighting us a lot, but when excuses like, if only they just let me have my way, were about all he could say, we all let him have it about how that's not how the world works. He tried getting help from our mother, but she refused to look at him. He started huffing and acting like he was hyperventilating, then intentionally fell to the floor. It's not the first time he's done this. My aunt just told him to stop milking it and get up. He screamed at her that we were all ruining his life and he wishes we were all dead. My parents were horrified. My brother refused to get up off the floor and kept breathing heavily to pretend to have some sort of attack, so everyone just left him laying there while they each said their piece about why they were there to him. He screamed at random a few times but didn't move from where he laid down eventually. Everyone started leaving and my parents had to actually drag my brother back to his room because he refused to get up off the floor. He's not used to people having no sympathy for him, especially from our parents. This is going to be a long, uphill battle. My aunt has offered to chip in for therapy, and my parents have taken her up on it. Let's hope therapy does my brother some good. Edit context. Some have been asking what happened with my brother's birthday rampage. Well, to put it simply, he didn't get a PS5, so he went mental with a chair and destroyed whatever he could with it, which was finally the breaking point for my parents, and they grounded him severely. Update for my spoiled brat. Brother has finally been allowed some privileges, and he hates them since the family intervention. My parents have kept my brother in check, and they are doing okay in terms of making up for years of treating me like crap. They've even promised to host my next birthday and have my favorite cake with my name on it. My brother did overhear this because my parents had him doing dishes in the kitchen, and he just stopped what he was doing and went right to his room. No fake crying, just a complete shutdown. He still glares at me from his window every time I leave when I come to visit a little while ago. My parents have allowed my brother some privileges for good behavior, though to my brother they're basically the opposite of anything he'd like. My parents decided that he could have a little fun for good behavior, so my dad dug out his old N64 and Game Boy Color from the 9S. He still had most of his old games for both systems, and also had an old CRT TV to hook them up to when they were offered to my brother. He just complained that they were old and boring. My dad just said he could suit himself then and go back to reading. Took one night before my brother was begging to have the old 90s game systems. He used to have many game systems, a gaming PC, and even a gaming chair with Bluetooth speakers on it now. All he has is a folding chair or his bed to sit on when gaming. I came by for a visit around the time he first got the N64 because my parents wanted to have me over for dinner, and I got to see my brother in his room yelling at the old CRT TV while playing Mario 64. He really wasn't happy, especially since he couldn't even go online to check for guides, walkthroughs, or cheat codes for the Game Boy Color. I saw he had some Pokemon games and at least one Donkey Kong. My dad has said that if my brother is extra good by the end of the summer, they'll upgrade him to a Game Boy Advance. My parents quickly realized, though, that the Game Boy Color would eat able of batteries, so my brother has to use a power cord for it now, and he does play it. Maybe because he used to have a phone in his hands playing app games so much, because my brother likes cycling but no longer owns a bike. Since our parents sold it, he was without an outlet to exercise. My dad found a used exercise bike on FB Marketplace and put it in my brother's room. He also got a used CD player mini boombox from somewhere the same day. So yeah, my brother just rides that exercise bike since he can't go outside unless it's to do chores, and he rides it aggressively. He tunes into whatever music gets him going, and then he rides that exercise bike hard from the look on his face. I'd call it hate riding, almost like what you'd expect to see on the face of a vindictive prison inmate exercising in their cell and waiting for the day they can get out and get revenge. I had mentioned this to my parents, and they have the same worries that I do. So my dad started burning CDs with my brother's favorite music that used to be on his gaming computer that they also sold. Each burned CD has 10 songs, and he would get one for every week of good behavior. He's only gotten one so far since this started, not because of bad behavior, but because not enough time has gone by for him to get more. I'm not sure if I'd call my brother's behavior good. He's just not really being bad. I don't hear him complaining out loud anymore most of the time, but I see it in his face. Especially when he glares at me from his window when I get on my mini-bic to go home. He definitely resents me, but it's not the same look he gives our parents when they aren't looking. He glares at them like they destroyed his life, but if I were to put it into words, he glares at me with envy, like I have everything he wants. The look just seems to say, just wait till I'm 18. I remember having those same thoughts when I wanted to move the hell out after high school, but I made sure I had life plans with the help of my aunt when I moved out, but my brother doesn't know anything about how to do that. So he's probably still thinking of it in the simplest ways a kid usually would. Oh, great. Now I'm sounding like a know-it-all. I have tried to talk with my brother, but he doesn't have much to say. I've been stopping by every few days to spend some time with him. We don't speak much because he's gotten very quiet, but he does seem to enjoy having someone to play with since our parents won't. He eagerly hands me a controller every time I'm there. We've mostly been playing racing games like Mario Kart on Dad's old N64 in my brother's room, and he gets pretty aggressive while playing. He keeps swinging the controller around wildly with nearly every move he makes, and has even shoved me over a few times when he was losing. I've learned to brace my legs so he can't do that. He had a few light tantrums for losing, but is getting a little better. I've had some GameFAQs walkthroughs and cheat codes of some of the games he's been playing on the old N64 printed out at the local library and put them in a binder for him, and that's made him be a little nicer to me. Our parents wanted to get some stuff for summer homeschooling for my brother, but I warned them that was probably not a good idea. He's already in an almost constant state of anger. And the goal is to mellow him out and make him more accepting. Life won't go his way like it used to anymore. Not piss him off even more. My dad got angry with me about how he's the father and not me. And that sparked an argument where I reminded him of the things that went on over the past decade, all of the favoritism, all of how I was blamed for so much, even how I had to hide my money at my aunt's house because they kept letting my brother try to steal it. I didn't outright say he's a bad parent, but it was heavily implied. He backed off, and my mom told him I was right, and trying to force home summer schooling on my brother will not help. That made my dad shut down, and he went to drink alone in the living room. My mom has apologized to me repeatedly over her past actions. She says she blames herself because it was her idea to coddle my brother so much. And my dad just went along with it. She told me that back then she was never thinking ahead to what my brother would be like as an adult. She basically refused to admit he was going to grow up, so she just kept spoiling him to try and keep him her as baby. My parents have scheduled couples counseling, but it's going to be a while before they get in due to the wait period. My dad is pretty obviously not looking forward to it. It's harder to make him admit wrongdoing than my mom. He caved and admitted how much he'd screwed up during the family intervention, but since then he's tried to act like he's just a normal parent. But I've made it clear that pretending that __ didn't happen won't make it go away, and my mom agrees with me. So that's where things are right now. Hopefully my next update will be better, update 5. This is not an update I was hoping for. My mom was secretly letting my brother have other privileges back while my dad was at work because he kept begging her. Why? Because he's special. My dad was holding to keeping my brother accountable, but my mom just couldn't do it and started letting my brother have his way again behind everyone's backs. And my brother kept demanding more and more from her once she started giving him what he wanted again. My mom bought a used Switch with a copy of Zelda Bot and let my brother play it in secret, and was letting him online with his laptop that was supposed to have been taken away unless needed for schoolwork. My brother demanded mom replace some of the things they sold and called her some horrible things when she said she couldn't because dad would notice this repeated over the course of several days, and my brother started to get violent, and mom finally hit her breaking point. She outright slapped my brother across the face as hard as she could, and then had a complete mental breakdown where she resorted to self-harm. She ended up calling my dad to come home early because she kept hurting herself. He rushed home and found my mom literally beating herself, and he had to make her stop. She's never done anything like this before. My brother was in total shock and freaking out about it. My dad blamed my brother and whooped his ass raw. He'd spanked me a few times when I was a kid, but I heard from Dad later that he'd really wailed on my brother while calling him an ungrateful brat. They did everything for then, took away the switch my mom had been hiding for him. My mom had to be taken into the ER and then had to be held for a psyche evaluation. She was found to be so heavily stressed that her anxiety was through the roof and had to be hospitalized. I saw a picture of my mom that my dad had taken before she was taken in for the psyche hold. She had 2 black eyes and her face was swollen and she'd ripped some of her own hair out. My dad implied she'd done more to herself, but I didn't see. However, my dad begged me to come over and watch my brother while they were away because he was afraid my brother may do something insane too. After everything that happened when I showed up, I found my brother huddled in his closet and crying. He wouldn't say much to me other than small apologies, and he jolted if I even so much as touched him. I ordered his favorite pizza on my dime and had it delivered. It's barbecue chicken with stuffed crust. It coaxed him out of his room and we ate dinner in awkward silence. I played Mario Kart on the N64 with him for a while after that, and he eventually broke down sobbing. He asked me how bad of a person he really was. I hesitated in saying anything at first, but I told him, I said it wasn't his fault for being raised spoiled because that was on our parents, but he is getting older and can't put all the blame on our parents anymore. I said he himself was entitled, violent, blames others for all of his faults, steals from people, and was in need of some serious counseling. My brother cried some more and asked me to leave the room. About an hour went by before he came out and we talked in the living room. My brother asked me what it was like being an adult. So I told him about the responsibilities I have in working a job, paying for gas, rent, utilities, etc., and how much I usually had left over each month for anything else. He was pretty shocked because no one had ever explained adult life to him like this, and I remarked that he'll be there soon enough in a few short years. My brother said he wished he didn't have to be an adult. He likes having his way and gaming all he wants, but then admitted that he knew I was going to say that was wrong, which I nodded and said he was correct. I remarked to him about how little I got compared to him growing up because he had to have everything, which is why I took lemons and made lemonade any way I could, like how I hid my money at my aunt's house and how I was afraid to keep nice things because he always wanted to take them away from me. This heart lasted until we saw Dad pull his car in. My brother bolted back to his room before Dad came in the house. When I saw my dad, he really didn't look so good. He looked like he'd been crying and was a complete mess. He apologized to me in tears and said he's finally truly starting to understand how awful of a parent he truly is and couldn't believe he was blind to it for so long. We hugged, he cried some more. Then he spilled his guts to me about everything that happened. I've never seen him cry so much. It's been well over a week now and nearing 2, and thus far my mom hasn't returned home yet. I'd hoped that if I waited this long to post about it, my mom would have come back, but wherever she is right now, she's still there. My dad won't say anything more about what's going on, but I think my mom might have been labeled a danger to herself and has been institutionalized. Otherwise, I think she would have been home by now. My brother has calmed down a lot, and he does the chores Dad gives him without complaint. Dad also gave him back the Switch Mom had bought for him and said not to F things up this time because if he wants all of his privileges back, he was going to earn them one by one. Yesterday, I talked with my brother over the phone while Dad was still at work, and he says he's afraid of Dad now, but also said that Dad hasn't even so much as raised his voice to him since the day Mom went mad. He admitted that he still wished things could go back to how they used to be. He misses all his electronics, his games, and his bike. I asked Dad about the bike, and he said he'll get him another one in time, but for now he's just too worried about Mom to even think about that kind of stuff. I'm kind of at a loss how to move forward here. Obviously, I know that my family is messed up and needs support in a variety of ways. I'm starting to feel sorry for my brother, but at the same time, I know that he needs this lesson to move forward in life, but I did not agree with Dad spanking him the way he did. I haven't said that to him, nor do I think I ever will unless he does it again, which I'm not so sure he will since he regrets it immensely, and my brother is starting to understand how to behave, but I still feel really mixed up over the lot of this. I knew getting my family changed for the better would be drama, but I didn't think it would be at this level.